Yes, people, welcome back to the channel. And as you can see by the title of the video, this is my official 26-27 season Premier League predictions. And as with every season, it's always one of those that's interesting to look back on when the season ends. And it is one of the most difficult things to predict. The Premier League has become extremely volatile and because of how just competitive it is, the parity, the quality throughout. It's not the easiest thing to predict. There's always surprises, there's always disappointments, but that's what makes this quite fun and entertaining to do. And without doubt, as always, with any Premier League prediction video, I'm bound to ruffle a few feathers. But I don't care. I might even ruffle the feathers of my own fan base. That generally does happen. It's always quite polarizing when it comes to the debate. But as you hear seagulls balking in the behind my studio, I don't know if the mic might have caught that. But anyway, it feels like the Brighton lot are already after me. But I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to get into the Premier League predictions. And the way that I'm going to do it is at first, I'm going to start with the relegation zone. And then I'm going to do the rest of the bottom half of the table. Then I'll do around the Conference Europa League places. Then I'll reveal around the Champions League spots up until the final two. And then I will show who I've predicted to be the top two and the Premier League winner. But without further ado, let me get into who I believe will be relegated. And it might sound or look obvious, or it might look a little bit throwaway and not exactly the most climatic type of prediction, but I think the bottom three and the relegated sides will be the championship promoters, which will be Ipswich, Coventry and Hull City. I think Hull City will be bottom. I think Ipswich will be second from bottom, and I think Coventry will be just about relegated in 18th place. And the reason why I have picked that, we have just last season apart, the previous two seasons, I believe, all three promoted sides were relegated straight back down. Last season we had a couple better in the performances. Obviously, I think Sunderland and Leeds did quite well, but I'm not quite sure this will happen again. I think it's become increasingly difficult for the promoted teams from the Championship to compete just because of the money in the Premier League and the standard that it's gotten to. That bridging the gap in the first season is very difficult unless you have other teams around have a bit of an aberration in terms of the way they perform, or you surprise everyone. As you can see, when Championship teams are getting promoted, they're spending a lot, they're funding a lot in terms of their teams, but sometimes the gap can be just a little bit too big, especially when it comes to navigating how strenuous week to week the Premier League season is, which is a little bit, I don't know, it could be disingenuous because the Championship is very difficult in terms of the scheduling, obviously 46 league games, but the Premier League is just a different kettle of fish, and I think that will be the bottom three. I think there are a couple of Premier League teams that, or usual Premier League teams or perennial Premier League teams that might be in a little bit of danger and could probably burst into that bottom three and be relegated if one of the Championship teams surprises. But as of now, I just can't see it. Okay, so now I'll get into the rest of the bottom half, pad out the rest of the bottom half of the table, and you'll see who can just about narrowly miss the drop. So in 11th place, I've got Bournemouth, I've got Everton in 12th, I've got Newcastle United in 13th. I think they will have another poor season, transitioning away from Eddie Howe. Losing Bruno Guimaraes, Tonali, Anthony Gordon, in disarray, unknown quantity in terms of the manager they've got. Newcastle might have even gone a little bit low, but have given a little bit more respect than they usually do. And I think they'll still finish in the bottom half of it. Nottingham Forest will finish 14th. Leeds in 15th. I think Fulham will be 16th. I think they will have a little bit of a difficult period post Marco Silva. And obviously, it will remain to be seen how good Arbo Lower is. And I've got Sunderland 17th, who will narrowly miss the drop after having a really good season. But I think they will have some difficulty. What did he call it? He call it a bit of a sophomore slump, I think Sunderland will have. And Sunderland did overperform their underlying metrics quite massively last season, and I don't think they'll be quite as lucky this. So that is the rest of my bottom half. I don't want to obviously speak about them too long. I think Bournemouth, there's a couple of teams here, obviously, that have going on to new managers, the likes of Forest, but I think Forest usually recruit just about well enough to survive, especially if they've got no Europe. I think Bournemouth will finish 11th. People might have them a little bit lower because they'll be balancing Europe as well, which is always difficult for teams doing that for the first time, especially when Iraola has obviously left, and that has been obviously their talismanic figure for the past couple seasons. And I think Everton, under David Moyes, I think they'll be steady. I think they'll be solidified in midfield. I think they're an underrated team, if I'm going to be honest. And I don't think they'll threaten the European places, but I don't think they'll be in danger of the drop either. I was tempted because people have high aspirations for Leeds. They think Leeds could be quite strong going into this season, but I'm not quite sure whether that will be. Obviously, we played him recent in pre-season. Daniel Farke turned a corner in the last stages of the season, but I still think in terms of the ceiling of the squad, it isn't that high, and I think them finishing around where I've put them sounds about right for me. But I don't want to dwell obviously too long on the bottom half of the table. That's the boring part. So we spoke about relegation, spoke about the bottom half of the table. Trying to be quick fire with this, not waffle on too much. And I'm going to get now into the top half of the table, which is obviously a little bit juicier in terms of when it comes to predictions. And this is where feathers start to get ruffled a little bit more. Okay, now into the business end. And from 10th to 7th places, I'm going to do 10th to 7th. I'm going to do from 6th to 3rd as my reveal. And then I'll reveal the final 2. So my 10th to 7th place teams are going to be Crystal Palace in 10th, Brentford in 9th, Brighton in 8th, and Aston Villa in 7th. And I think Palace will finish bang on mid-table because I'm not really that enamoured when it comes to Oliver Glasner. I think they still have a decent amount of quality within the team. I think when they move away, obviously from Glasner's system, which was a little bit of a pragmatic back three. I know they've lost LaCroix. They still have Adam Morton. They still, at this moment in time, have Mateta. Obviously, Nketiah will be back. I just think there's enough quality within Palace's team. They usually recruit pretty well. I know that was mostly in the Dougie Friedman era, but I think without obviously European football, which I think did affect them a little bit last season, I think the squad is still strong enough as to where they can finish bang on in mid-table. I think Brentford will still be just as good as they've been. Always good recruiters, excited with obviously Mamadou Sangare. Keith Andrews seems to be a really competent manager, but I think just as a club, there's a lot of synergy and structure between their managers, their boardroom, their recruitment staff, and I think they've cemented themselves as not a top, but a very much solidified Premier League side. And I think they're in for another strong season, and they do find themselves being really, really strong at home. And I think their home form usually is the G-Tech, which is one of the big reasons why they managed to stay in the league. I think for teams that aren't one of the bigger sides, your home form matters a hell of a lot in terms of how long your stay in the league will be. And I think that's where some teams hang their hat on. I think Brentford are one of them sides, even though setting up deep, being pragmatic and having transitional threat with the likes of obviously Utara and Sharda, etc., and Thiago again, makes them always dangerous. I think Brentford are well-coached, well-oiled machine, and I think 9th place sounds about right for them. And so above them, I've got Brighton. I think the teams that I've put below them, I don't think they're quite as strong. I think Brighton under Herzler's obviously gaining more experience. They'll probably go from strength to strength. They always seem to recruit well. They have a lot of youngsters that they've signed, a lot of project signings that they signed that were on the fringes last season that might emerge a little bit more. They've got a few players with a lot of talent that were quite young, that haven't touched their ceiling, that could actually make a step forward as well. So that's probably why they haven't been incredibly active in the transfer market. because they did recruit quite a lot over the past couple of seasons, and not everyone they recruited were players that necessarily needed to jump in and be starting week in, week out straight away. They were young, they had a little bit of a project feel about them, and Brighton still managed to remain competitive and steady during that time period. And if they have a few of those players now that take that step forward and bang, under Brighton, who, similar to Brentford, extremely well run, like Bournemouth are, and these teams have found like a bit of a meta to keep themselves competitive and steady in the league. And I think them qualifying, I think if 8th obviously gets them conference places, I think Brighton are the best of the rest outside of the usual top 7 that have cemented themselves. So that's my 10th to 7th place. And now we're starting to get a little bit more into the nitty gritty, and we are going to go what will be the top 6, but we're going to start off by showing you what the 3rd to the 6th places will be. And this is it. So I've got Tottenham 6th, Manchester United 5th, Liverpool 4th, and they've got Man City 3rd. And honestly, I think the top 7, top 6 is the biggest toss-up imaginable. It's extremely hard to predict. But for me, as things stand on this date, the current state of the market, players that are available to each team, taking the managers into account, I think this will be where things will be. Obviously, Aston Villa, I've got Watkins is another year older. I'm not quite sure. Has Watkins left? I'm not sure if he's left, but if he has left, but I know obviously, but even if he is, he's still getting on a little bit in age. I know they've obviously banking on Maggio, but they've had a couple of injuries happen in the Super Cup as well, which might derail the start of their season a little bit. Morgan Rogers has obviously left, as I mentioned. Emilio Martinez looks to be leaving to Juventus as well. I think Villa will still be good. Unai Emery is a very good manager. He's able to get blood out of rocks, so to speak, and I think there's enough talent there to maximise, obviously, likes of Manzambi, João Gomez, who's another one that I think got injured. And I think they'll be decent enough. I don't think they'll finish quite as high as they have in the past couple of seasons, whilst they have to obviously balance Europe again. Obviously balance the Champions League football. I just feel like 7th place sounds about right for them. I think Tottenham finishing 6th. Some people might have them higher because just like Chelsea, they don't have any European football, which does matter and does help a hell of a lot when you're navigating a Premier League season, especially when you spend heavily on one of the bigger clubs where you'll be going into most weekends fresh and as favourites in most of the league fixtures. So, but I just think Tottenham, De Zerbi can be a bit volatile. I think they have a very high floor in a lot of their individual talent, Tottenham, but they just don't ever seem to have those world-class ceiling raisers that can kind of take them that one step further. They don't have a Harry Kane, they don't have a Heung-min Son level player anymore. It's just a bunch of good to average players, and some are very good. But they just don't have enough absolute difference makers at this level, and that's why I think they might be capped. De Zerbi can be extremely volatile. His system can be very, very particular, and there might be some growing pains to begin with. So I was back and forth between Tottenham finishing above Manchester United, and I'm a United fan, so obviously I have a little bit of tribal bias. But I think United, I can't put them any lower than this. I'm just obviously got a little bit of tribalism that goes into it, even though I still have my concerns and reservations. I think I'd put United higher than this. I'd put aside in this if we weren't navigating Champions League football. But I think the squad still has quite a few holes in it. I think the AC Milan game exposed it, even though some bits of pre-season was decent. It's not always that indicative. And I think there's some promising elements of United, but we are still very incomplete. And I don't think the current iteration of Manchester United squad, with some of the players and the injury issues, the lack of athleticism in important areas like midfield and in the defence, as things stand right now, before we dip into the market, possibly before the end of August, I don't think I'm brave and bold enough. I don't think I can be as deluded enough to put us higher than 5th at the moment. But I think between Tottenham in 6th, Manchester United in 5th, and Liverpool in 4th, and even City in 3rd. So I've got City, Liverpool, Manchester United, Tottenham. And I think those places and those positions for those particular teams are very interchangeable, are quite interchangeable. I think it will be tight I think second to fifth place will be very tight in the league table, if I'm honest. So it is really chop and change. A lot of things can happen in between it. I think Liverpool are having a transitional period and will have difficulty. I won't be surprised if Liverpool finish sixth and we finish fourth and Tottenham finish fifth or vice versa. But I just thought right now, if Liverpool finish the window strong, I think they still will spend quite a lot. I think they're going to get Bacola through the door. I think Rio and Gamoa will emerge. Will the likes of Isak take a little bit of a leap after basically missing all of last season? Will Florian Wirtz be better? Szoboszlai is still excellent for them. I think defensively is where the worry is. How good will Jeremy Jackett be? How much depth in their squad do they have? Do they have any academy youngsters that are going to take the next leap, the likes of Nione, I believe his name is? So there's question marks. Will Van Dijk deteriorate even further? But I just still believe that Liverpool, when I'm looking at both squads, and I think what made me a little bit more pessimistic about Manchester United was with all our players back, I think the AC Milan game a week away from Hull kind of highlighted the deficiencies that Manchester United have in their squad that will be exacerbated by Champions League football. Liverpool are another one that will have to navigate that. So people think Tottenham have an advantage in this sense. But I just think Tottenham, you have to always have that element of knowing that the Spurs DNA will always mean that they will probably underachieve a little bit more than they should. So you could very easily assume Tottenham will finish fourth and finish ahead of the likes of Liverpool and United maybe. But I just don't feel like I can outright ever say that when it comes to Tottenham. Especially when they have finished 17th back-to-back years. And I think they will make a big jump back into the top six, but I just don't necessarily think it'll be jumping back into top four places. Especially with some of the injury issues that they've had over the past couple of years. So Manchester City being third, I think they will be distant from the league winners. As I've said, I also think City are one of those teams where if the season goes quite badly for them, you won't be surprised. I think they will be very much within that top four fight because I think the points totals between third place and sixth place will be very small. I think these are placings that will be interchangeable going into the last few weeks of the season and people will still be vying for position. I just think City will eventually find themselves, they're no strangers if their season is quite difficult and Maresca's out of the door early, that they'll go and spend 150 billion on someone on a couple of players in January and finish the season strong. I can't pretend they still don't have quality players there. I think Erling Haaland is just a force multiplier. I think Erling Haaland is worth a couple of league placings on his own. Will the likes of Doku and Semenyo emerge around him? Will Foden be back to himself? Cherky? Who will they sign in the window? I don't think the window is anywhere near finished for the likes of Manchester City. So I think they will take a massive dip under Maresca in general. I think the Arsenal game against Charity Shield showed me that. I just don't necessarily believe that even though they might be hovering around fourth place come towards the end of the season, I think they will still pit for third. And this is now when I go into the top two. As you can see, there's two teams left. It's Chelsea and Arsenal. And I've gone for Arsenal as league winners, which makes me feel sick to say. And I think Chelsea may finish second. And whenever you do a Premier League prediction, you always have to have that little bit of a out there, almost like putting your neck on the line type of prediction. And something with Chelsea and no European football is synonymous with league success. They do seem to be really strong in the league when they don't have any Europe historically. And I still think Chelsea are going to dip further into the market. I think I saw them against Real Sociedad in terms of their squad. I think Chelsea, in terms of their first 12 players in the team, are quite strong. They will be adaptable in terms of formation and tactics under Xabi Alonso. They still do have match winners in the team. I think they have a lot of physicality throughout the team as well. I think they massively underachieved last season. I think they're better than that, what they showed. Like João Pedro, Cole Palmer will probably have a bounce back season. Morgan Rogers, Nicholas Jackson's still there. Neto's still there. How good would the Italian kid at wing back be? They've added a central centre back figure in Lacroix alongside Fofana and Colwell back after having most of the season out in it with an ACL. I think Chelsea could be a surprise package with no Champions League and no Europe to balance, and just league. I think the team and personnel group strong enough. Even still, they might sign a couple players more with Quenda coming into the fray as well, where I think they could pit the best of the rest after Arsenal. I think it'll be close. As I said, I think Arsenal win the title by quite a distance. And I think the points totals between second place Chelsea and sixth place Tottenham won't be very big. I think it will be quite small. So you could probably toss up where obviously teams will finish within that. But that is what I currently feel like my Premier League predictions will be. I think my Premier League predictions historically haven't been the best. And I'm just going to make the excuses and say it's just down to variables. But I thought I'd just do like a quick one. So that is my full Premier League prediction table. That is how I feel like the season will end as of now. Obviously, you still got signings to go. Injuries will happen. The transfer window is obviously still open. There are always shocks and surprises. But with the best that I can do for where I stand right now, that's how I predict the Premier League will predictions. And that's how the season will finish in terms of the tabling. But anyway, let me know what you think. Am I wrong? Am I right? Anything egregious that you think I picked? Anyone that you feel like I'm underestimating? Anyone that you think I'm overestimating? I'm sure you'll have a lot to say in the comments. Don't be afraid to tell me, give me a piece of your mind, because no Premier League prediction table is the same, and it's not an exact science, and it never really goes to the script. But anyway, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit the hype button, and I will see you next time.